Crosby, and you're listening to the Mean Joe Grizzly podcast.
Hey, it's Tom Matthews from Return of the Living Dead and Friday the 13th, Part 6, to name a few, and you're listening to the Mean Joe Grizzly podcast. Enjoy.
Hey guys, Tyler Mann here, and you're listening to the Mean Joe Grizzly podcast.
Hi, I'm John Russo, screenwriter of Night of the Living Dead. Welcome to the Mean Joe Grizzly podcast. Enjoy.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Joe Grizzly, bitch.
What up, Militia? I'm Joe Grizzly, and when I'm not exploring the mysterious and magical world of the Hollow Earth or watching kaiju beat the shit out of each other, I'm at the Grizzly Cave, watching movies, reading comics, listening to metal, and of course, crushing beers. And finally, the wait is over. After 3 years, Godzilla and Kong are back. But before we get started, please make sure to follow me on all social media pages, subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, and subscribe to the YouTube channel by clicking the links in the description below. By doing that, you'll help me continue to talk about all forms of badassery. So the question is, was the wait worth it? Let's talk about it. This is Grizzly Grade Reviews. With Godzilla patrolling the surface and keeping all the Titans in check, Kong spends his days in Hollow Earth surviving and looking for more of his kind. But when he finally does, all is not as it seems, as Kong comes into contact with a ruthless Titan known as the Scar King. I want to start off by addressing the annoying elephant in the room. If you're a casual movie fan that can't turn off your brain and have fun, then you will pick this movie apart and hate it. If you are, quote, a Godzilla fan, but then you try to compare it to Godzilla -1, you are not going to like it, period. You're not going to like it. But if you grew up watching Godzilla films, particularly the Showa era, you are going to like this a lot. And I fall on to the latter. I love the character of Godzilla. Godzilla is my favorite fictional character. I think I've stated that multiple times on this show, and it's really hard for me to believe, just by looking at all the reactions online, of some of the most ridiculous reasons for people not liking this movie who claim they are Godzilla fans. If you're a Godzilla fan and you say that you hated this movie because you said it was, quote, silly and goofy, then you hated the entire Showa era. Because after the first film, all of those movies are goofy in some way, shape, or form. They're all meant to be not taken serious. These aren't award-winning films, guys. This isn't Gojira 1954. This isn't Return of Godzilla. This isn't Godzilla -1. And it's really hard for me to sit back as a Godzilla fan and see these, quote, other Godzilla fans bashing it for that reason. It is okay if you did not like the film. I'm accepting of other people's opinions. That's never going to be something that I'm not. But if that is your reason for not liking the film, you're ridiculous. And I question you being a Godzilla fan. So with that out of the way, this movie was definitely made for hardcore Godzilla fans who are fans of the Showa era in particular. Pretty much people who can just turn their brains off and have fun. Probably the biggest reason why this movie worked for me so well is it almost completely focuses on the monsters. And it's for the first time ever, the monsters feel like the main characters. that is like a breath of fresh air into this franchise. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of this franchise. I think all the movies in this franchise are great. Do they have their problems? Again, I don't have to keep repeating myself. These movies aren't supposed to be award-winning films. They all have their issues. But what makes those issues even harder to deal with is if they're issues of, for instance, the big glaring problem, the human characters just being empty and dull. When we do not come to these movies for these human characters, we come to these movies to watch giant monsters beat the shit out of each other. Now, don't get me wrong, you have your exceptions like Godzilla 1954 and Godzilla -1 in particular, all had very compelling human stories. And that's okay. You can have both, guys. And that's something that I have been preaching for months leading up to this movie, is that you can have the over-the-top Godzilla films or over-the-top monster films and have these serious, great, like, masterpiece films in this genre. You can have both. You don't have to choose. This is kind of like the whole Marvel versus DC argument. You don't have to choose. You can enjoy both. And it's ridiculous to divide everything up into this tribal culture bullshit that we do nowadays with literally everything. But Kong and Godzilla both have their roles and storylines and character development in this movie. Kong in particular, you actually get to see most of the movie through the perspective of Kong and his day-to-day struggle and what it's like for him to have to deal with him being the last of his kind. It's very well done because you don't even have to say any words because they do such a good job of showing emotion on Kong's face and his mannerisms and stuff. Godzilla, even though he is a more secondary main character in this movie, they do a good job through most of the film making him the badass that he is. He's going around fighting other titans, and you get to see quite a few different titans that have been hinted through other forms of media with this franchise that I thought was pretty freaking cool. As far as the story goes, they do a pretty decent job of expanding the Monsterverse lore and bringing a lot of the stuff that's kind of been up in the air back around full circle, like the Great Titan War and the role that Scar King plays in this. All of it is by way of Kong's storyline, and I thought they did a pretty good job of doing that without having to rely solely on this big explanation from the human characters. They do a good job of portraying most of it through Kong's storyline. As far as the Scar King himself, he is pretty freaking awesome, not gonna lie. I had a hard time believing that the Scar King was gonna be this very menacing villain as far as like challenging both Godzilla and Kong. I just didn't think it was going to be feasible that he could beat both of them on his own. And they do a pretty good job of like giving you an explanation on why and how he can challenge them both and essentially destroy the entire world and take it over. Thought that was very well done. And for those of you that don't know, there are multiple titans in this movie. It's not just Kong, Godzilla, Scar King. There are several different titans from Monsterverse lore, and one in particular that they've been hinting at since really there was a DLC that dropped for the Call of Duty video game that had like a Godzilla and Kong theme to it, and they had some lore drop in there as well. It's been teased since back then, and that is the monster of Shimu, the first titan. Shimu's pretty freaking cool. I'd had my doubts on that as well, and I actually like the design and like the role that creature plays in the Scar King's plan and his ability to keep control over all of the apes that he is ruling over. Which leads into my next point, the fights. The battles between the monsters in this movie are freaking awesome. You got the over-the-top, like, WWE style fights between Godzilla and Kong versus other members of his race. But then you have these brutal knockdown drag out fights that Godzilla gets in with different monsters. And when I say brutal, I mean brutal. there's some pretty gnarly monster violence in this movie. And this movie has a fight just about every 10 to 15 minutes. Outside of the individual fights, there's good team-up fights where Godzilla and Kong team up to fight other monsters, and I thought that was pretty damn cool as well. I wanted a deeper dive into Hollow Earth and its ecosystems and its different creatures and monsters, and we definitely got that here as well. Not as much as I actually wanted it to do, but it was pretty good. They showed us that there are different levels of Hollow Earth. Like, not only do you have the Hollow Earth, but it has its own subterranean level as well, and that was really freaking cool. Also, I thought that the human characters were going to be getting in the way in this movie, just like they have in most of these movies, but they were actually decent. I didn't mind seeing them on screen because they were used so sparingly and they were used so well that they weren't annoying to me. Normally they're super annoying and I don't even want to see them. I didn't mind like the human characters in like Godzilla 2014 or Kong Skull Island. I thought the human characters in those were great. I didn't even mind them in Godzilla vs. Kong, but man, and Godzilla King of the Monsters, some of those human characters really got on my nerves. And we didn't have to deal with that here. All the characters in this one are pretty likable. Most of them are returning characters, so that also helped out a lot. Moving on to the other elephant in the room, the CGI. The visual effects looked phenomenal in this movie. And over the last couple of days since the movie released, I have been hearing a lot of people complain about how the CGI did not look good. It only looked good for Kong. It looked really bad for Godzilla. This looked bad. That looked bad. But this looked good. Blah, blah. That's all bullshit. Every monster in this movie looks great. The CGI looks great. I've heard some people talk about the scaling of these monsters looking off too, because they look like normal size beings in Hollow Earth, but they look ginormous in our life and like real life and on our level. Nah, you guys just don't put things in perspective very well, that the Hollow Earth is this ginormous place. So they're going to look small compared to how they look when they're on the surface level. It's just common sense at this point, guys. And the CGI looked great in all aspects. Hollow Earth looked phenomenal. All the colors, all the majestic looking landscapes, everything looked so freaking good. All the monsters looked good. Kong looked really good. I will say that Kong probably looked the best out of every monster that's here. But damn, Godzilla had some good shots too, man. I just don't see a lot of the stuff I'm hearing people complain about. I did not see that. And I'm probably going to go watch this again. But I pay a lot of attention to details, guys, and I didn't see any of this stuff y'all were bitching about. So, and I say y'all, I'm not necessarily talking about whoever's listening. I'm talking about the naysayers and the loud guys on the internet. And finally, I know a lot of people didn't like Junkie XL's score in Godzilla vs. Kong. But man, I really liked his score in this one. I thought it did a great job in the last movie. But this movie, he's got this new synth score that he put in. And man, it is phenomenal. I think it might be one of my favorite Monsterverse scores yet. He did a phenomenal job. I hope that they keep bringing him back if he keeps doing work like this. Now, after my initial hype wore off and all my excitement died down, and sitting back and analyzing the movie in my head, here are my actual complaints about the movie. Starting off with the obvious, for me as a Godzilla fan, Godzilla needs to take the spotlight more in these movies. Now, with that being said, you're going to hear online that Godzilla's barely in a movie and he serves no purpose and all this, that, and other. That's all bullshit. He actually serves a purpose and he's in the movie quite a bit, but he is not the center point of the movie. And as a Godzilla fan and as the monster who they initially modeled this cinematic universe around, it kind of sucks that they're not putting him at the forefront anymore. They had him in the forefront in his two movies, And then they had Kong Skull Island, and then GVK, they made that more Kong-centric. And then this one was completely Kong-centric. So now it's time for Godzilla to take that center role. And I read somewhere in an interview with Adam Wingard, he said if he was given the chance to make another Monsterverse movie, he was going to do a more Godzilla-centered story. And I really hope that is true, because as a Godzilla fan, I need Big G to get more spotlight. Don't get me wrong, I like Kong too. And I do like what they're doing with Kong's storyline and stuff. I thought that was pretty cool what they're doing with it, but I'm here for Godzilla. We're here for Big G. And if you're going to have him be the focal monster in your universe, then we need more of him. And it could be a stipulation that Toho put on the rights of using that character. That's something that we all don't know behind the scenes. But if that is not the case, give us some more Godzilla. That's all we want. Make him more of a importance to the Monsterverse again. Moving on, although I'm okay with the more over-the-top tone, and I understand that you have to suspend disbelief when you're watching a movie where a giant ape and a giant radioactive dinosaur are fighting each other or killing other monsters. Some of the silliness in this one, it was a little much. There was a couple of times in the movie where I was like, okay, that's a little much. And now when I say a couple of times, I literally mean a couple of times. Like there was 2 times involving Kong that I felt was very ridiculous. And not in the sense of what they did with Kong, but how they did it and the time that it took for them to do it and how much of a hand-wavy explanation they gave for it. Some of it made sense, but the speed and time in which they accomplished said act was pretty fucking ridiculous. And I understand that these movies are going to be a little silly. And I know that's everyone's main complaint about this one, that it just looks fucking stupid and silly. But sometimes it does go a little far, and I think there was a couple of times I was like, all right, that's a little much. There is, and you see this in the trailer, so I'm not spoiling anything for you, there is a Godzilla vs. Kong rematch, and I was very satisfied with that rematch, other than one part, and it was one part that just made Godzilla look ridiculous for a moment, and then it quickly got turned right back on Kong. But that one moment I was like, alright, that's a little much. And yeah, that's coming from me being a Godzilla fan, but it was one of those parts that's like, alright, come on. That would never happen. That was a little much for me. And finally, my last complaint, I love the score of this movie, but there were times where they would have these random songs play, and sometimes those random songs just didn't make any sense and they felt super forced, almost like how Illumination just forces in these songs for no reason at all. Like the Super Mario movies got that too. Like there'll just be a random AC/DC song play or something like that. But even more in this movie, it was random. Like there's one point where I believe it is Kiss plays I Was Made for Loving You Baby, and when it happens, it makes no fucking sense, and it doesn't fit the tone of the scene, and it kind of sucked. I was like, yeah, I like this song, but what the fuck is it got to do with this? It just didn't make any sense, and it didn't fit at all. So I felt like there was a few times that they did that where it didn't make any sense, and there was a couple of times I was like, oh, that's cool as shit. I like that song playing in the background while they're doing what they're doing. But that's really all my complaints, guys. Like, I had a good time with this movie, and I don't judge these films like I would judge an Oppenheimer or even like a Halloween 78 or a Godzilla -1. I judge all movies individually for different reasons and in different ways. And for me, Godzilla Kong, The New Empire finally gives us fans of the Monsterverse something that we've been asking for from the beginning. And that was a more narrow focus on the monsters. And it definitely delivers that. Adam Wingard brings us the most action-packed installment yet, filled with great monster fights, loads of monsters, and majestic landscapes, and all portrayed with this stunning and colorful CGI. And sure, it has its issues. It's no masterpiece, but for kaiju fans, it doesn't need to be. So with that being said, Godzilla Kong, the New Empire, gets a 4 out of 5 and is Grizzly grade guaranteed. Go turn off your brains and have some fun. You'll enjoy it, especially if you're a giant monster movie fan and it's playing in a theater near you. Go support this movie because I believe that we're going to be getting a sequel, because I'm pretty sure it made its budget back already in its opening weekend. So go check it out. And that does it for another episode. Make sure you click the links in the description and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, and also follow the YouTube channel so you don't miss any of the content I'm bringing your way. Also, make sure you check out Carl Casey at Whitebat Audio. He is a synthwave master, and his music is being used throughout each episode, so check him out on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Well, that does it for March. Now we are moving on to April. Got some potential horror classics releasing this month with Abigail, Sting, and a couple of others. And got a few action films in there as well, like The Monkey Man. That one actually looks like a Malaysian John Wick, so probably going to be checking that one out as well. So make sure you stay tuned for reviews on those. But in the meantime, check out the latest episode of the Monster Manual that I just put up on Gozer the Gozerian from Ghostbusters. I'll leave the link for that episode down in the description. And once again, thank you all. I can't do this without y'all. I appreciate everyone that supports me and listens to the show. Go see Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire. And until next time, remember, I'm Joe Grizzly, bitch.